If you want to explore the music of Black Sabbath but don't know where to start, this video will help you decide which studio albums to try first. The first thing to do is to decide what sound you like. With Black Sabbath, this will be dictated by which moods or styles of music you enjoy, as they went through a few musical phases from doomy to experimental to commercial. Which singer they had at the time may also affect this, as the singer tended to heavily impact the sound of each period, and they have had a lot of singers. Sabbath fans can be quite particular about which singer they prefer, but it's usually Ozzy Osbourne. They had three main periods that all sound quite different from each other. These are the Ozzy era, which lasted mainly throughout the 70s, the Dio era, which was the early 80s and a couple of other brief subsequent periods, and the Tony Martin era, which lasted from the late 80s to the mid-90s. They had various other singers for short periods between these. If you're looking for that doomy sound that Sabbath are associated with, heaviness, crunchiness, doominess, you need to start with the first 6 albums with Ozzy Osbourne on vocals. That's Black Sabbath, Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and Sabotage. You need to start with the caveat that if you're expecting them to be continuously crunchy and heavy from start to finish, you're not going to get that, and that Sabbath are not really a heavy metal band as such. They're much more eclectic than that. All of these albums have far more than just heavy, evil sounding songs. Furthermore, another caveat you need to understand is that you're not going to get a devil worshipping and all this stuff. They really had nothing to do with devils or black magic. It's just a name they happen to give their band. There are some pretty evil sounding songs, and there are some of the songs are about the occult and that kind of thing, but you're not going to get devil worshipping and this kind of thing. They're just a heavy rock band. The place to start really is, and the place where heavy rock itself started, and you can quite clearly hear that, is on the first album, Black Sabbath, track number 1, Black Sabbath, which was not the first place to use the flattened fifth in popular music. I think Jimi Hendrix had used it, and probably some other bands had used it. But it's not always about who did something first. It's more about who everybody heard first, everybody copied first. You know, Metallica didn't necessarily invent thrash, but it's where everyone heard it and everyone copied them. Same here with Sabbath. The sound of the flattened fifth on the title track is very pronounced, does sound very evil. Even to this day, it's very distinctive, and you can imagine how distinctive it would have been at the time, and what an impact it would have had. It's hard for us to understand it when we weren't there then, but for the people who were there then, and when they contrasted it against hippie music and all the stuff that was going on then, it must have really stood out a lot. So obviously that's their signature track, Black Sabbath, that and one or two others. NIB, another one of their signature tracks, one of the first head-banging songs, you could say, probably. The Wizard is also punchy and heavy. Wicked World is really good. It's a really good album. To this day, it still sounds pretty fresh, pretty crunchy, pretty heavy, a lot of distortion. It doesn't sound like old dad's amps like you get on a lot of 70s rock. It does still sound pretty crunchy and heavy. So that's got to be your starting point. They then went on to refine that sound further. You'll get more consistency on Paranoid, consistent crunchiness from start to finish. And if you're looking for heavy albums which are from start to finish, you can headbang to and all the rest of it, it's the first 2 or 3 albums you need to look at. Of course, the album is packed full of genre standards, War Pigs. It really probably introduced the idea of adding a lot of dissonance and chromaticism into rock songs, and that's what creates the tension and a lot of the heaviness. You've probably heard, even if you don't own the album, you've probably heard all of these songs. Paranoid, the title track, is quite overlooked in some ways, although it's their most famous song. When you think about the speed of it, it's a lot quicker than the other songs on the album, or any songs they've done up until this point, and features a lot of palm-muted, down-picked, high-speed chugging. You hadn't heard that very much before this album, and when you think about bands like Metallica who have made a career out of doing that, I think the influence of Paranoid is overlooked. Iron Man, very, very famous song. Also, that's a kind of slow, dirgy kind of song. So they were really introducing different approaches very early In War Pigs, Paranoid and Iron Man, you've got contrast there. You've got that sort of medium-paced heaviness of War Pigs. You've got the fast, I wouldn't call it thrash, but fast and exciting Paranoid. And you've got Iron Man, which is that sort of slow, dirgy kind of doomy sound. So you're already starting to hear the birth of heavy metal, sort of doomy metal, things like that, starting here. So you have to own the first two albums, the classics of the genre, which any sort of hard rock fan probably should just own in your collection. Where they start to get a bit more eclectic is Master of Reality, which it gets even heavier. Sweetleaf, you could say that's the birth of stoner rock. A lot of people would say so. Children of the Grave, very heavy, very evil sounding. I don't know if it was the first song to use the galloping riff, but it's certainly the place where most people heard it and then copied it. And as you probably know, Iron Maiden have been doing that galloping stuff for like 50 years. Lots of bands, Metallica do it, listen to the Four Horsemen and songs like that. It's very influential. Into the Void, the final track, that was overlooked for many years. It's now starting to get the recognition it deserves. It's very heavy, very crunchy. And this album, the first three albums, there's a lot of bluesy sound on them as well as crunchiness and heaviness. They're starting to abandon that a little bit on this album. You've got these kind of interludes like Embryo and Orchid, which are almost like some kind of medieval acoustic madrigals. So they're starting to look into more folk and becoming a lot more eclectic. They really didn't have any limits on what kind of music they wanted to make. I don't think they really knew what they were making. They were just making music, and what came out they recorded, and they were inventing genres as they went along and just doing what they wanted. And it's just full of eclecticism and originality. They're just doing stuff that hadn't been done before by any bands at this point. They continued on with that with Volume 4, which is probably might be their most adventurous and experimental album. It's got pretty heavy songs on it. Under the Sun sounds really evil and heavy and crunchy. Supernaut is really heavy, classic tracks. But you got ones which sound a lot more. You've now got ballads like track 3, Changes, which Ozzy Osbourne had a #1 hit with in the UK with his daughter. But I'm not sure it really got anywhere when Black Sabbath released it. And you got, it's starting to sound, at times they sound a bit hippie-ish. They were pretty against hippie music because they didn't really think there was anything to be happy about in the world. But some of it sounds hippie-ish, some of it sounds folksy. You're getting more and more experimental, more eclectic, more daring. This one is a much more layered and textured album than the previous three, studio-wise and in terms of the writing. It's a classic, but I would say it might take you a bit more work to understand what's so good about it. It took me quite a few years to really understand this, but this is a classic. Now, this is one of their very best albums, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. The title track, you must know that is heavy as hell. This is where they're really starting to detune. They had done detuning on Master of Reality before, I think down to C sharp, which is pretty low, particularly for the time. But their detuning is now starting to become the norm on their albums, throughout the albums, which makes it even heavier. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, slow, dirgy, grinding. I think you can hear the birth of grunge and that kind of music in songs like that and on this album. Again, it's still nice and eclectic, playing around with different styles, different tempos. National Acrobat is really interesting. Sabracadabra, Killing Yourself to Live. These are classic songs. This is a classic album. That would be a good starting point just for Sabbath Bloody Sabbath on its own. That is one of their greatest songs. Possibly their best album, the culmination of all of these previous 5 albums. This came out in 74, was it? No, 75 apparently, but this was their 6th album. That's 6 albums in 5 years. They did a lot of learning in a short space of time. And it's like the culmination. It's really, at times it's really heavy, at times it's really folksy. It's so eclectic, and they pull it off so well. Hole in the Sky is like a slower to mid-tempo, heavy rock song. Then you've got this kind of track number 2 is like a Spanish guitar introduction to Symptom of the Universe. And so, again, we're hearing the births of more genres of music. Because Symptom of the Universe, you could say it's like the start of death metal. There had been thrash songs before Symptom of the Universe. If you listen to, what's it called? Fireball by Deep Purple, or Stone Cold Crazy by Queen. They're pretty thrashy songs. You could call them proto-thrash. And they had come out before this, but they didn't have that evil, flattened fifth, sinister sound that Symptom of the Universe has got. And you only have to listen to this song to hear where Slayer started. It sounds very Slayer-ish in a way. And most of the songs on this are excellent. Superzar is a brilliant piece of music. It's kind of like Black Sabbath's version of Kashmir, but much shorter and much more compacted. It uses a choir and odd time signatures. That is a classic piece of music, well recommended. Am I Going Insane? That's like a pop song. So and they pull it off really successfully. It doesn't sound cheesy or silly. This album, they try many genres and they pull them off really well. This could be their best album if you're into the Ozzy era. From there, they started to go a bit more experimental. They released Technical Ecstasy, followed by Never Say Die. Technical Ecstasy is a very strong album, songwriting-wise. It's the first time in their career when they're starting to sound a bit derivative, though. You can hear them copying the sounds of contemporary bands of the time, like Kiss, the Eagles, I think it might be Journey or one of those bands, but you can definitely hear one of the songs sounds so like Kiss, and I think it's Rock and Roll Doctor. There's one on this sung by, I think it's sung by Bill Ward. I haven't listened to it for ages, but it sounds like John Lennon, because I guess they were big Beatles fans. So you're starting to hear some derivativeness here. The first time they've done that, because all their previous albums, they were just making music and it just hadn't been done before. They were just making it up as they went along. Here they're actually trying to sound like bands of the time. Doesn't mean the songs are not good, but that derivativeness, to me, it makes it not quite a classic album like the first six. Dirty Women is one of their better songs. It's a really good album. It's starting to lose that doominess, that evilness. So if that's what you're looking for, these last couple of albums are ones you want to they're not going to be for you. Look, this is one of their most, I'd say it's by far their most controversial album. I think it's a classic. Don't listen to people who slag it off. There are loads of people who slag this album off. It's a classic. It's really good. If you're looking for heaviness, really heavy, doomy, flattened fist, you're not going to get it. I have a strong suspicion that's why a lot of people hate it. You're not going to hear Paranoid or Master of Reality or those sinister sounding songs. You just won't hear that on this album. But again, it's very eclectic. It's in its own way, it's heavy, it's crunchy. The song of Never Say Die is really good. Johnny Blade, Junior's Eyes, these are great songs. Air Dance, that's a song that gets slagged off a lot because it's got a jazzy part in it. It's a really good song. It's really good. There is a very peculiar song on it called I think it's Breakout. Bizarre saxophone music, sounds like the kind of music you might have expected to hear in a strip club in the 70s in Soho in London. It's very uncharacteristic of Sabbath. I mean, it's not a bad piece of music, but songs like that, I can see why people got annoyed with this album, but there isn't any badly made music. It's got another Bill Ward song, I think it's Swinging the Chain. It's a decent song, but most of the songs on this album are great. It's got a pretty iconic front cover too. So the first 8 Sabbath albums, I think you just can't really go wrong with them. These two are a bit divisive, but the first 6, they're all-time classics, and any sort of really self-respecting metal fan probably ought to own the first 6 Sabbath albums. If you're a staunch Ozzy fan and you don't want to listen to Dio and the other singers, there are a couple of opportunities, a couple of other things you could try. The 1997, or was it 98, Reunion. It's a live album. Ozzy hadn't been in the band since the late 70s. He came back in the late 90s. They did a Reunion live album. It's very good, but it's got a few, I guess, 2 new studio tracks on the end of it, which are pretty decent with Ozzy on vocals. So, and you're not interested in the other eras of it, then you could try listening to that. And if you really want to, you can just try their final album, 13. It's a good album produced by Rick Rubin. It sounds like a Rick Rubin album, because normally he just gets bands to just copy whatever it was they did, which was successful the first time, and that's what they do. It's a good album. It sounds like Sabbath, but I would say, like a lot of Rick Rubin albums, it sounds made to order. So he told them, listen to your first album and just copy that. That's what they've done. This sounds like the first two albums kind of mixed together. It's a good album, decent album. Honestly, most of the songs are not super memorable, are going to become all-time classics in their canon. But it's a decent album, and you could get the special edition, which has a few extra tracks on the end if you really want to sort of savour the Ozzy era. You could also, it's probably a bit expensive on eBay these days, but get the NDP, which you couldn't buy in shops. You could only get it by going to their final concert tour and buying it at the show. It's decent enough. It's got 5 studio tracks and a few live tracks. These are the offcuts from the 13 sessions, which weren't good enough to get on it, I guess. So you can kind of hear why. They're decent enough songs, but they don't blow me away. And like I said, it's quite expensive on eBay these days. But if you really, really love the Ozzy stuff, you probably will want this, because that's it. After that, they did so many albums without him. They did 9 albums with him, I guess 9 studio albums with him, and the EP. So that's the Ozzy era. Well worth checking out pretty much all of the albums he did with Sabbath. Now, after they kicked out Ozzy Osbourne, they replaced him with Ronnie James Dio, who is arguably the best metal singer there ever was. Much better singer than Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy's style is very distinctive and bluesy, but Dio was a legit proper singer, proper musician, lots of ability to control dynamics and mixing the masculine and the feminine and contrasting them against each other. He was very skillful, brilliant singer. If you like the sound of Ronnie James Dio, perhaps you liked him in Rainbow, you liked his solo stuff, and you're not one of those people who writes off anything that doesn't have Ozzy in it. The Dio era is very important in Sabbath, and they produced a lot of, I mean, most of what they did was of high quality, but you've got to start with the first 2 Dio albums, which are Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. These are both all-time classics. Brilliant albums. Dio is a brilliant singer. He's a much better singer than Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy was had a very distinctive voice and more of a blues singer, but Dio is a proper legit singer, and he there's no contest. But Dio brings in a completely different sound. From when Dio joins, not only do they, obviously the singing is better, but you get the music becomes much more organized, much tighter, much more orthodox the way it's written. So you probably are losing a bit of that strange X factor of the Ozzy years, where they were sort of inventing music as they went along, inventing genres, and everything was very eclectic and strange sounding and organic sounding, I guess you could say. This is more orthodox sounding music, orthodox long structures. Harmonically, there's a big jump forward. A lot of people would probably attribute that to the joining of Dio. I reckon it's far more likely to be the joining of the keyboardist Jeff Nichols, who this was the first album where he really did anything on it. And as you can imagine, any kind of keys players are very savvy when it comes to chords, harmony generally. And I would say that it was him that caused that sort of harmonic revolution in Black Sabbath, where they've really jumped forward from sounding like they're just making it up for themselves, and they sound very self-taught, whereas on this they sound much more professional. And the reason why I think this is because after Dio left, it carried on for years and years. You can hear it throughout all of the Tony Martin albums, and it carried on with this kind of extra importance on harmony, extra reliance on keyboards. So I would say Jeff Nichols and Dio both made a big impact. It sounds like a different band. It doesn't sound like Black Sabbath if you think of Black Sabbath as being the Ozzy Osbourne years sound. This actually sounds like a completely different band. But the quality is fantastic. The first album, Heaven and Hell, Neon Nights, fast-paced, hard-rocking opening track, classic song in their canon. Children of the Sea, that's slow and crunchy. Starts off with that sort of jangly arpeggiated intro, which they went on to use that format many times over the years, during the Dio years at least, or even like on songs like Anno Mundi with Tony Martin. Kind of became a template, Children of the Sea, of Tony Iommi's songwriting style. The title track is one of the best heavy metal songs ever made. It's one of the best Sabbath tracks ever made. That is just brilliant. It's just a magnificent piece of music. It's got that evilness, that weird X factor where Tony Iommi's created a riff and you can't quite put your finger on sort of where has this come from. How did he create this? Like, so many of his riffs actually sound, I don't believe in any form of supernatural, but so many of his riffs actually sound like they have come from some other kind of plane. And he does believe in all that kind of thing and all this sort of out-of-body experiences and meeting angels and all the weird stuff he goes on about in his autobiography. Honestly, the riffage on this album and the X factor of that song, particularly Heaven and Hell, it does sound like it comes from like some other kind of plane. It's very strange. Die Young, that is fast and heavy. Do I want to say new wave of British heavy metal? I don't know. It's fast and it's heavy. Dio is brilliant in that song. The contrasting of that soft feminine vocals with really hard aggressive growling that he did. He was brilliant at that. He's so good at juxtaposition and dynamics. And this is one of Dio's best ever performances on this album. You could say it sort of fits in a little bit with the new wave of British heavy metal that was going on at the time. Sounds like a completely different band, but just as good a band. These are brilliant albums. Mob Rules, I would say it's even better. Most people prefer Heaven and Hell. To me, Heaven and Hell, half of it is amazing, half of it is a bit album filler. Mob Rules from start to finish is really strong all the way through. Are there songs on this quite as good as the Song of Heaven and Hell, Die Young? Maybe, maybe not. But I would say like this is like really solid all the way through, whereas this is amazing at times and a bit average at others. The production is really interesting on this. I think it was done by Martin Birch. I think they were both done by Martin Birch, who did Iron Maiden for years and years. This is a very live sounding production on it. Sounds like they just stood in the studio and played it. It's great production. Gives it a more organicness, which if you think about the first Dio album, Heaven and Hell, it's very, very tight sounding. So they lost some of that sort of rawness possibly from the Ozzy years, that sort of just standing there and playing it in the studio and that's the recording. They seem to have brought that sound back a bit on this album. Turn Up the Night, number 1, that's like a sequel to Neon Nights off of the Heaven and Hell. Voodoo, excellent stompy song. Sign of the Southern Cross is an epic. That is one of their greatest songs. Very heavy, I think people like to describe riffs like that as megalithic or something like that. But that is slow and heavy and dirgy and so atmospheric. Classic song. The Mob Rules, classic track. Country Girl, very overlooked. That is a great riff and a good song. Not quite the characteristic sort of heavy metal sound, but it's crunchy and heavy enough. Falling Off the Edge of the World, one of their best songs. It kind of contrasts the slowness of Sign of the Southern Cross, and then it suddenly breaks into this fast-paced new wave of British heavy metal sound. It's probably one of their best songs. Fantastic. If you are a fan of Sabbath and you're sort of open-minded enough not just to think it should only be Ozzy, you must own these two. In fact, if you're a fan of heavy metal music, you must own these two albums. They're classics. Those two produced the album Live Evil. It's a very good live album. It's quite well liked by a lot of people. It's decent. It's got all the classic tracks from those two Dio albums. It's also got Ozzy era tracks, NIB, Paranoid, Children of the Grave. It's interesting to hear how Dio sings those. It's a decent live album. And things fell apart pretty soon and he walked out after that and was replaced. But if you really want to explore the Dio era more, then he came back in the early 90s with Dehumanizer, which it's heavy. It's a heavy album. It was produced by that Mac guy who produced all the Queen albums in the 80s. I'm not very keen on the production. It's a bit sterile. It's certainly very raw, but it lacks a bit of warmth for me. But it's very heavy. If you want heaviness, this is a good album to get. The songs are good. I just find there's a bit of that's lacking. There's a coldness about this album which I've never quite enjoyed. But some people love it. Some people think it's one of the best Dio albums. Certainly heavy, well-written songs. It's a good album, worth checking out if you're really into the Dio era. And the final sort of hurrah of Dio was in 2009. They came back. It was Black Sabbath. They either weren't allowed to call themselves Black Sabbath or they didn't want to. I'm not really sure which. But they produced this album, The Devil You Know. It's a Sabbath album. I mean, just the name, The Devil You Know. It's like he's saying, yeah, it is us, but we're not allowed to call ourselves that. And it's even got the Black Sabbath mascot on it, for crying out loud. So this is a Sabbath album. It was recently promoted on YouTube under the Black Sabbath account when it was re-released. So it sounds like they finally accepted it into the canon. I wouldn't call it a classic album. What I would say is this: the production is brilliant, really heavy, and it's got that thickness and a bit of warmth to it. The guy Mike Exeter, who's Tony Iommi's sort of sound engineer, I guess, has done a fantastic job on this. It really sounds heavy and crunchy. It's tremendous production on this, and it's only got one track on it where you could say, oh, that is like a all-time classic Sabbath song, Bible Black. Brilliant song. Again, it's got that sort of Children of the Sea jangly acoustic intro thing. Then it gets heavy. Atom and Evil, really good opening track. Fear is a good song. There's one on here, it's so evil sounding. I think it's Follow the Tears. But yeah, this is well produced. Tony Iommi's riffage and just is very good at times on this album. Not just the riffage, just little flourishes here and there, little sort of, not so much riffs, but in between riffs he puts a little lick here and a little lick there, which just really amplify things and make it much heavier sounding. And you can really hear Tony Iommi's sort of years of experience of creating great riffage. He really knows how to do it. Dio sounds great on this. The timbre of his voice has gone down a bit because he's late 60s or so when he recorded this, but Geezer sounds so good on this. The way the bass lines intertwine around the Tony Iommi's riff and kind of complement them. He doesn't try to copy them. He almost sort of does counterpoint against them and just complements them and highlights them. You can hear so much experienced musicianship and musical judgment and knowledge on this. So in that way, it's a very interesting album. But the songs generally, they're not classics, but it's a good solid album. Pretty decent way for Dio to go out. You'd want to start with the first two Dio Sabbath albums, but this is what, if you really enjoyed those, it's well worth getting this album. It's if you are someone who likes the heaviness and the doominess and the evilness, this might be the best one. Every song on it is evil sounding, and they sort of finally gave in to this sort of, oh, everyone thinks we're devil worshippers, we might as well just do it sort of thing. And it's heavy from start to finish. If you like dirge and crunchiness and evilness, this is well worth listening to. It's a decent album. It produced a couple of live albums which are also very good, which you might want to check out. Yeah, after they kicked Dio out in 82 or 83 or so, they got Ian Gillan in to record one album. Ian Gillan, the singer of Deep Purple, produced this album with the infamous album cover. Infamously bad, some people think. I really like it. It sounds like what it is. It looks kind of evil. It sounds evil. Trashed, that's another sort of fast one like Neon Nights and Turn Up the Night, which were on the previous two albums with Dio. Another sort of up-tempo, upbeat, quite cheerful rocker. Stonehenge is just scary noises. It's not really a song. It's very atmospheric, and it leads into Disturbing the Priest, which is one of their evilest sounding songs. If you're looking for the evilness and the griminess and the heaviness, this would be a good place to go to this album. The Dark, again, that's just some sort of, noises. It's the intro to Zero the Hero, which I think is probably their most evil song they ever did. It's really evil, really heavy. There's a rumour that it inspired the riff to Paradise City by Guns N' Roses, the verse riff. You can kind of hear that in there. So the first half of the album sounds like Sabbath. It sounds heavy, sounds doomy, with Ian Gillan singing on it, doing all his screams and stuff that he used to do a lot in Deep Purple. The second half of the album starts to sound a lot more like Deep Purple. They don't sound quite evil like you might expect Sabbath to sound. Basically it sounds like Deep Purple songs. They're decent songs too, but the ones at the start of the album are fantastic. Trashed, Disturbing the Priest, Zero the Hero, they're great songs. Yeah, I think this is a classic album. It's got strange production. They had a bit of a problem in the studio where what they had in the studio didn't sound like what came out on the final pressing. So some people find the production to be a bit murky, but I find that it makes it heavier and more atmospheric. If you really don't like it, there is a bootleg around where it's the original unmixed demos, so it didn't get to the stage of getting messed up in the production process. So these sound a lot cleaner, but they are kind of demos. They sound pretty similar to what's on the album, but not quite the fully finished tracks. It's a bit of a rare bootleg, but you can easily listen to it on YouTube. So you get a cleaner sound on this one, but I like the murkiness of the original one. I think it's a classic Black Sabbath album. If you don't want to hear Ian Gillan doing all his screaming and writing all his silly suggestive lyrics that he's written on it, that he got away with in Deep Purple, but which sound a bit silly in Black Sabbath, then it might put you off. But I think it's a classic album, and it's really heavy. If you're looking for heavy Sabbath, then you should get this. From this point on, the band started to get a little bit farcical, changing singers almost, it seemed like every album. They've been through 3 already on their albums, Ozzy, Dio and Ian Gillan. They then, Ian Gillan went back to Deep Purple on very amicable terms, because I think that the album was only supposed to be one album, Born Again. They did the tour. Incidentally, if you listen to the singing of Ian Gillan on the Sabbath tour he was really screaming, doing high-pitched stuff. Brilliant performances, but I think he blew his voice out permanently, because if you listen to Deep Purple albums after that, his voice was never the same again. But he left, he went to Deep Purple. Tony Iommi wanted to make a solo album. Don Arden, who was Sharon Osbourne's gangster record producer dad, said, you can't just call it Tony Iommi, no one will buy it. Put Black Sabbath on the front of it, people will buy that. So that's what he did. He made Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. Now this doesn't sound anything like Black Sabbath, because it was supposed to be a solo album, but I think it's a great album. If you can divorce yourself from expecting it to sound like Ozzy Osbourne or have profound lyrics like Geezer Butler, and then if you can be open-minded and think, I'm happy to listen to any good hard rock music, this is a very good album. In for the Kill, that is a great, really great, heavy, fast-paced track. No Stranger to Love is like a strange ballad that they did. I think they released it as a single. It's a bit 80s schmaltzy ballady, but it's a good song. Turn to Stone, again, another fast-paced rocker. Seventh Star, Danger Zone, that's another one that's fast and heavy. And most of the album is like that. It's nothing profound on it. It's just, this is where they were starting to embrace sort of 80s commercial hard rock. But it's heavy. The riffage is great. The singing is great because it's got Glenn Hughes on it, who is still a brilliant singer now. He's in his mid-70s and can still hit ridiculous notes. And his performance on this is very good. Tony Iommi sounds great, but it's much more simplified music. It's not what you're not going to get profound ideas and genre-breaking ideas. It's basically just a 80s heavy metal album. But I really enjoy this. It's a sort of album you can listen to get motivated to go to the gym or something. They went through a few singers in deciding who was going to sing on this. I think they even auditioned Michael Bolton and a lot of people. And there was this strange guy. This is a bootleg that you can get. a strange guy called Jeff Fenholt, who was in the band. He wasn't really in the band, but he played with them for a few days, just recording the demos for this album, while they decided whether they thought he fit their sound or not. So they recorded loads of demos. It sounds very similar to this because it's the same thing. It's just recording demos for this album and him singing on it instead of someone else. So it sounds quite similar. And it's interesting. He's got an interesting voice, a good singer. So it might be worth a listen just out of curiosity. But he's a strange guy because he was in there. He was worked with them for about 3 days. I don't want to say in it. He wasn't officially a singer of the band. He recorded a demo. They said, no, see ya. And he built a whole career as a television evangelist, by saying that he used to be a devil worshipper, and the proof of it was that he was in Black Sabbath, and that he had completely repented and turned over a new leaf and found the Lord and all this kind of thing. And he built a whole decades-long career out of doing that, so it's an interesting little footnote in the Sabbath history, and lots of weird little stories like that in Black Sabbath lore, you could say. After that, they got a singer called Ray Gillan, not Ian Gillan, but Ray Gillan, an American guy out of a band called Badlands, was it? Never really listened to them, but he's a great singer. He was supposed to appear on this album, The Eternal Idol, which came out in '87. And if you get the deluxe edition, you can get his performance of the album, that was supposed to be the album. He was their singer. He did a tour with them. He recorded an album. Their manager stole all their money and they couldn't pay him for his performance, so he walked out. And then they had a few days before the album was supposed to be pressed and released, so they quickly found Tony Martin and said, can you quickly just copy everything he sung on it and just re-sing it in your own voice? And he did it, and this is a good album, very good album. Probably one of their last sort of major label ones for quite a while. The Shining is a great, really stomping opening track. It's a really good crunchy track. Ancient Warriors, really heavy and really creepy sounding, a very strange piece of music, but very good. Uses weird time signatures, weird scales. That's really clever, and that's a great song. It's full of good songs, solid but nothing amazing. There's a song at the end, I guess the song The Eternal Idol, track number 9. It's pretty predictable and just a standard sort of, sounds pretty like a standard metal song, but it's very atmospheric, very evil sounding. It's really leaning into this where people seem to expect Sabbath to sound like that, and Tony Iommi's thought to himself, yeah, I better make a really doomy evil one to match expectations, and it's a decent song. This is a good album. I'm not sure I quite go as far as to call it a classic, but it's got some great tracks on it. Tony Martin is a great singer. He's kind of like a Dio, he's like a Dio light. He kind of sounds like he's copied Dio, but you can hear it. It's not a clone of Dio. You can certainly hear the Dio influence, but he's got his own sound, his own voice, his own little idiosyncrasies. And Tony Martin was a great singer and has been very overlooked. This period of Black Sabbath, he was actually the longest lasting singer for a long time. From this point, about 87 or so, until about the mid-90s or even the late 90s, he might even have been with them officially until they sort of kicked him out and got Ozzy back. Yeah, so he went from at least sort of the 87 until sort of 95, 96. That was a long period for Black Sabbath to have one singer. And he was very good, very overlooked. He's a very good singer, still a good singer now. And that period of Black Sabbath history has been a bit unfairly overlooked. It sounds just more like 80s commercial metal. It's not profound anymore, but it's good stuff. And if you want to listen to it, then you should check out The Eternal Idol. Headless Cross, which is a classic, considered a bit of a classic in their canon. Tear, that is a very good album. Well, those are the 3 good ones. We'll talk about the less good ones afterwards. So yeah, well worth listening to this. Well produced and heavy. This one's really heavy. It's got Cozy Powell on drums. It's got a guest appearance by Brian May. Now this one is the one Black Sabbath album in the catalogue where it's full of, it is actually on about devils and all this nonsense. The reason for that is Tony Martin, this was his first proper album where he had an artistic contribution to it. This album he was just brought in to quickly sing in an emergency, and the lyrics had been written and the melodies had been written, and he was there to just sort of be a session musician and just replicate that. This one he wrote the lyrics, wrote the vocal melodies, and he, like a lot of people, thought to himself, oh, Black Sabbath, it must be about devils, so he wrote all the lyrics about devils. It's a really good album. Headless Cross is like a 80s cheesy hard rock song, but it's good. Devil and Daughter is really good, galloping, stompy, heavy song. When Death Calls, I think that's the one that's got Brian May on it. Black Moon, that's a great song. Nightwing, it's now sounding like just 80s sort of, it sounds like 80s metal. It doesn't sound particularly idiosyncratic and particularly unique, and like it certainly doesn't sound like Black Sabbath anymore. Doesn't mean it's not a good album. It is a decent album. A lot of people think it's a classic. It's very strong, but just don't expect Dio and don't expect Ozzy. Just expect a very solid 80s metal album. That's what this is. It's full of great riffage. You will never find a Sabbath album or an Iommi album which isn't packed with inspired riffage. I mean, what you're looking for is riffs, then like kind of that is what my number one priority, I guess, when I listen to Sabbath is what are the riffs like, which is why I like almost all of their albums, because they're all packed full of classic riffs, despite whatever style they're doing, whoever the singer is, however farcical the situation was getting in the band. Iommi has made more classic riffs than any guitarist in history. He has a my phone memory got full. I was talking about Headless Cross and Tony Iommi's supernatural ability to just churn out riffs endlessly, profound riffs. Yeah, very supernatural. You will get many of these great riffs on this album. As I was saying, the lyrics on this album were to do with devils and nonsense, because Tony Martin had a misapprehension about the band, which a lot of people have, but it's a bit weird that he would have it while he was in the band, but never mind. The reaction to that was he then started to write about Norse mythology on this album Tyr, which is a very strong album. Starting to sound more like Euro metal, sort of a bit similar sound to this, but now getting more, again, the focus on keyboards and harmonization and rich chords, and you can really hear Jeff Nichols's influence on this album. Certainly doesn't sound like early Sabbath. It's a lot more orthodox music, but they didn't really think about how they were structuring it. They just went with their instincts. This one, it's much more trained. They sound like trained musicians, I guess you could say, which is, I guess, what started in the early 80s with Dio and continued on throughout the 80s. So that was a big difference in the sounds. You've got this very raw, untrained sound in the 70s to this much tighter, more musically orthodox and harmonically sticking to the rules kind of thing that you get in the 80s Sabbath. Track number 1, Anno Mundi, that is one of their best ever songs. Doesn't sound like, you're not going to hear Ozzy sound on that one. It's sort of like a late 80s, early 90s power metal song. It is a brilliant song. It's sort of like slow, heavy, grinding riff. That is a classic. Sabbath Stones is a really good song as well. In fact, most of the songs on this, The Lawmaker, Feels Good to Me, that's another one of their sort of 80s schmaltzy power ballads, but it's a decent song. This is a really good album. Strong, good production, great musicianship, some great riffage by Iommi. The singing by Tony Martin is really good. And another kind of a classic album which has been very overlooked by anyone who, they only want to think as Black Sabbath as being the original 4 members and having that kind of quite raw, primal sound that they had in the 70s stuff. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you like or that's what you grew up with. Nothing wrong with having that view, but if you're someone who's just perhaps you're more interested in, you're really into riffage, great riffs, then you know all of the eras of Sabbath are very valid, and these two are full of great riffs. So you should check them out if you're looking for riffage. After that, things started to go a bit more sloppy. Cross Purposes, which came out in 1994, 4 years after Tear. It's a good album, it's a solid album, but it's nothing amazing. The production is very good, it's well produced, it's well performed, decent enough riffage, but it's the album where it's starting to sound like Iommi is perhaps running out of ideas a bit, because the riffs are not that memorable, and there's a lot, they've come back to this theme of regurgitating the sound of contemporary bands. If you remember, I told you on Technical Ecstasy they were sounding like a lot of the bands of the time, like the Eagles and Kiss. This one you can even hear, they even sound like Alice in Chains on one of them. I don't remember which one it was, I haven't listened to it for quite a few years. I don't remember the name of the track because I don't always pay attention to track names, but one of them sounds really like Alice in Chains. One of them they ripped off Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. I think it might be Cardinal Sin. And Evil Eye, I think that's one of the tracks they even rip off Into the Void, their own song. So there's a lot of copying other bands going on this one, which I don't appreciate that. What I like about Sabbath is they always just seem to sound like themselves and no one else, and they don't have any preconceived ideas about how they're going to make the music anyway. They just kind of, what comes out, comes out. That's what I really like. That's where you get the variety and the eclecticism from, and that's where you get this creation of new styles of music, which they kept doing throughout the 70s. This one is just a solid sort of hard rock heavy metal album, well produced, well performed, well written. Nothing is really amazing about it, but it's decent enough. If you're a hardcore Sabbath fan, you'll get it anyway, won't you? Now, where things, the nadir of their career, where things really started to go wrong, was Forbidden. Sounds rushed, production is quite bad. Their record label were trying to force them into doing commercialization, so they got Ice-T to do spoken word on track 1, Illusion of Power. Doesn't sound very good. As you can see, the front cover sort of looks like it was drawn by a 12-year-old, but in its own way it's got its own weird little charm, and when you actually open it up you get, it's like a sort of a tapestry, long sort of tapestry. It turns out that is part of a tapestry, if you want to call it. Yeah. And it's a pretty cool cartoony picture, but again, you don't expect to see cartoons on a Black Sabbath album. In its own way, it's got some charm to it, but at the time, I think it was quite ridiculed. And yeah, I mean, this looks a bit like it's drawn by a kid, and the production sounds like it was produced by a kid. It's got some there are a few tracks with some really good riffage on it. And there's one song which I think is really quite decent, called I Won't Cry For You. It's a ballad. It's a heavy ballad. It's a good song. That's a decent song. But Guilty as Hell and a few of the others, they have some really good riffs, but it's like the songs are not great, but there are some good bits and pieces on this album. But this is the only album where you could say, in Black Sabbath, where you could really call it a bad album. Some people have recently reappraised it because the album has recently been remixed, remastered and re-released by Tony Iommi. And it sounds a lot different. The production is much, much better. The production actually sounds good. And he's brought out things that you couldn't really hear in the original production. He's changed things around. Some of the songs sound quite different. They sound like quite different sounding tracks and with different bits that you couldn't hear before. Some people have reappraised it and think this is kind of quite a decent album once you've heard it with good production and the arrangement has been changed to something a bit more how Iommi originally envisaged it. I've heard it online. I don't own these remasters that they recently did, but I've heard that online and it does sound very different and it's interesting. And yeah, I would say it is a better album that way. The original is their worst album. There's not much doubt about that, I would say. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, they got 20 studio albums, I don't know where to start. I don't really know what sound I like. They've almost got as many best-ofs as they have studio albums. I've got quite a few of them, as you can see here. The original one, which was considered quite a classic amongst, you listen to, I don't know, Pantera and Metallica and all these metal bands. They used to quote this album quite a lot. We sold our soul for rock and roll. I remember Dimebag talking about this one a lot, being a big influence on him. It's got most of their classics on it, from the first album, the second album, the third album. Goes up to, looks like it goes up to the fifth album, I guess, which was Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. So you can get a lot of, if you just want like a good introduction to the early Ozzy years and their early sound, this is a good choice. You get ones where they just, it's got all sorts of, this one is, it's got loads of stuff. It's got from Ozzy era to the Dio era to even, it's one or two Ian Gillan tracks on it at the back here. And I think it's got Tony Martin on it as well. It's a very strange hodgepodge, this one, and they've put them in a strange order because you've got Ozzy stuff here and then Ian Gillan stuff here, which is much later. Zero the Hero, classic track. But then before that, you've got like, not very long before that, Am I Going Insane, which is like a pop song that Ozzy did with them on Sabotage in about 1975. So it's got bouncing back and forth between different eras, but loads of good songs on this. This one's a bit of a collector's item now, the Sabbath Stones. Mainly deals with the Tony Martin era. In fact, it's all the Tony Martin era from Headless Cross until towards the end of the Tony Martin era. And it's got one bonus track on it, which you can't really get anywhere else, called Loser Gets It All, which was the Japanese exclusive track on Headless Cross. That's a pretty good song. Oh, it's got one or two of, it's the IRS years, IRS Records, which was this small record label that they were on from late 80s until the mid-90s. So it does have some Dio songs from the Dehumanizer album. So if you just want to hear their sort of latter period, that's quite an interesting one. The Dio years is a really good best of. If you are interested in this, if you like Dio, if you like his fantastic solo band, he did classic albums. The first two are classic metal albums. The first two or three, Rainbows, are all-time classic albums that he did with Rainbow and Richie Blackmore. So if you're a fan of Dio, this is a great place to start. I mean, I bought this like when it came out, I think, and it had loads of good stuff on it, and I was very happy with it because I really enjoyed the Dio era, and they've packed a lot of the great songs off of it. It's got Falling Off the Edge of the World. Doesn't have the Sign of the Southern Cross. That's a big omission. But if you're a real fan of Dio, it's got 3 new songs with Dio, 3 new studio tracks they added onto the end, especially for this album. This is actually what prompted them to come back as Heaven and Hell and reunite with Dio. This one came out in the late 2000s. It went well. They thought, shall we reunite and make a new studio album? And they did. This was the genesis of it. This is a very good one. Of course, you have to like Dio. If you're an Ozzy fan, then you won't want that one. This one, I think they really... When did they release this? The Ultimate Collection. They released this 2016, sort of around the end of the very end of their career, when they were sort of packing it in. I guess during the End tour. Got all the classics on it. 2 CDs packed full of... It's Ozzy era only. It's just that period where Sharon and Ozzy didn't want anything which didn't have Ozzy on it to be recognised as Sabbath, so they just ignored the existence of all that stuff. It's all the Ozzy era, but as you can see, it's got 2 CDs packed full of songs. Pretty much all the classic Ozzy era songs on it. Some like slightly deeper cuts like Dirty Women, Evil Woman, that cover off the first album. Yeah, it's interesting. So I've got, if you just want some, if you are really only interested in the Ozzy era and you want to hear the whole expanse of the Ozzy era, this is a good place to this is a good place to start. It encompasses from 1970 to 1978 pretty well. Anyway, hopefully I've given you some good starting points where to start with this seminal band who probably created heavy metal as we know it, and who were the originators of so many ideas which are really integral to music even to this day, and very overlooked by the mainstream. These guys should be legends I mean, they are to people who like hard rock music, but you know, the general public generally, I mean, their albums should be in the Smithsonian Institute or something like that. Anyway, I hope the video helped. See you next time.